You're listening to Beyond the Sermon, the podcast of First Methodist Church in Collingswood, New Jersey. Our goal is to not only share our sermons, but to go beyond the sermon in conversations about what we're learning and what God is doing in our lives and our community. You can find out more information about our church at fumccollingswood.org. Thanks for joining us for this conversation.
Critics say that this was the greatest sermon that has been preached here in 30 years.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not true.
It's true that critics have said that.
Well, I'm sure that what they're saying is not true.
Why do you think that certain critics might say that?
I don't know. I did have several people say that that sermon kind of brought several things together for them in a way that they had not heard before. And specifically just things like, I'd always been told, these are the spiritual gifts, figure out which is yours and go do it. I never heard that there was space to grow in them or learn that, or that we need to have grace for people who are figuring it out. And so I think more than anything, if there was something distinct about this sermon, it is just a topic that people aren't used to hearing much about. We talk about personality clashes in the church a lot. And I think we just tend to chalk most conflict up to that, right?
Yeah.
It's either personality clashes or it's just, priorities clashing, slightly different priorities. But to think that they're the result of actual God-given gifts at times. I'm not saying all the time. Sometimes people in the church are still just jerks. But sometimes it's because of the way God has made us and gifted us.
When was the time that you felt like your gift led to a tension in relationship with someone else within the church, as a layperson or in ministry?
The time that comes to my mind was when at my last church, we were trying to get a midweek thing started. And we were planning to do like a potluck dinner each week where people just kind of brought something. And then people would break up into different study groups, not dissimilar from what I've heard described here, except here the meals were prepared and all that kind of stuff. So now at my last church, they built a whole new building in the early 2000s, and the kitchen had a microwave and a fridge in it. It's a little hard to prepare a meal in that. As we started doing that, there, for me, with one of my gifts being teaching and stuff, my focus tended to be on what things are going to be offered. What are the programs? What are the studies? What are the, how are we going to help people grow because of this? And one of our other staff members, one of her gifts was hospitality. She's like, oh, well, whatever happens there, let's focus on the food and the meals, and that became a big focus for her. And it wasn't that it was bad, but at times in conversations, in staff meetings and stuff like that, in preparation for these things, we have some tension about like where we need to spend time talking about how we were doing this, right? Because she wanted to work out all the logistics of how we were going to host people well. But for me, that was just like, well, people bring food and it'll happen. Like, because I don't actually care that much about that stuff. But for her, that really mattered, to make it a place that was welcoming and inviting to people, where they felt like they could both contribute and be a part of what was happening. And she saw that being a key way for people to then get plugged into some of the teaching ministries. And so we were looking at the same situation. We're just sitting on opposite sides of the room, right? I was looking at it, the teaching is what should get people here, and we should be focused on what are we offering that's going to really help people grow and make them want to come and be part of it. She's like, well, but if we do the meal well, they'll want to come, and then they'll just stay and they'll, grow into all those other things. And so that's just one that comes to my mind. What about for you, Jeremy?
Well, pridefully, I would say most of the tensions was just me being right. And nothing was happening gift-wise on the other side. At least that's how I felt on a couple of arguments within Pittman growing up. But I think whenever, I mean, it's been a handful of conversations within ministry where a person is discounted from ever being fruitful because of their past. And so, because I believe that God can use and transform and any person at any time, I don't just be like, oh, really bad history here, let me not put any effort in that direction and let me just put attention on the ones that are the good, ideal, act the most Christian-y in church or whatever. And so I don't know necessarily what gift that correlates to, because we haven't done the second part of the series.
Right.
Yeah.
But not dissimilar from Paul and Barnabas's disagreement over John Mark.
And so, that's kind of where I think I've seen regularly, even people with best intentions. It's like, oh yeah, I love and I care about them, but like, I'm not going to stick my neck out for something that I haven't seen have results or whatever in the past. Yeah, so I'd say that's one of them for me. And so with that story of Paul and John Mark and Barnabas, do you find yourself relating more to Paul or Barnabas usually in those types of situations?
So I would probably say I tend to relate more to Paul. We talked a few weeks about the one or the 99. Are you the one who goes after the one sheep or cares for the 99? I tend to be a group person, the 99, the whole. Like I love to interact with people individually to an extent. But when I think about ministry, when I think about my role within the church, it's the things that naturally or supernaturally in this case, kind of come to my mind is more related to the whole group. And I think that's where Paul's kind of coming from it. Like, we don't need to take a risk on this one guy and make him the focus of what we're doing, try to like bring him along again. He wanted to be free to worry about all the other ministry that was happening in the churches they were visiting and all that kind of stuff. So I think I kind of relate a little bit more towards Paul.
Yeah, more towards the whole.
Would that be the same for you, or?
I think it depends on the circumstance. I like I said, we're very limited on the context of Barnabas and John Mark and what Barnabas was aware of during the departure in the first missionary journey and the beginning of the second missionary journey. I find that, there's certain individuals in ministry where it's like okay, you can have your own opinion, you can do things differently. Don't expect for me to take you along for the ride while you're still in that mess.
Sure.
In other cases where it's like I see the potential, I see the fruit, and I'm willing to stick up for individuals to keep them in certain spots.
I had some memory in my head that John Mark it mentioned being like a nephew to Barnabas or something like that, but I can't actually find that. So,
yeah, well, you did mention that he's the author of the Gospel of Mark. Which we usually don't make that connection with that story.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. That when in this whole dynamic, is he writing that? Was it during the second journey? He's like, I got my story, and then he leaves. or
No, I would imagine that came later. New Testament scholars, kind of the consensus is Mark kind of talked a lot with Peter. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of because Mark wasn't necessarily one of one of the 12 or anything. So there's stories in his gospel that is like, well, you had to be somewhat close to Jesus to get those stories. And so, but then he spent time with Peter. And so maybe, as it became clear, maybe Peter was getting a little later in life, and, those kind of things where they said, let's make sure we get some of these things written down before we lose the eyewitnesses.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, we often, just thinking chronologically in our own mind, we say, all right, the Gospels come before all, Acts and all the letters and that kind of stuff. So we just assume that those probably came first.
No, they were written last.
Well, a lot of them.
Most of them. Yeah.
I would say a lot of the early church letters were actually written before the Gospels.
I think Mark was the earliest.
Generally, that's what's
believed.
And that then Luke and Matthew took Mark and kind of added their own takes. That's why there's so much similarity between the three, because they're kind of built on the same bones that Mark put in there, but they expanded more. Matthew gives a lot more teaching, is tailoring it for a Jewish audience. Luke is, coming at it from a Gentile perspective. He's a doctor, so you hear a lot about healings and deliverances and those kind of things. And then you've got John, and he's just doing his own thing.
Well, what's so annoying in the world of TikTok and deconstruction TikTok, it's like Jesus was never considered God until John, and John just wanted to push this narrative that Jesus was God, but we don't see that anywhere before John, and John wasn't written until closer to 90, 100 AD, and it's like, it's mentioned multiple times in the letters, and those are earlier than all of the Gospels.
Yeah. And even Mark, I think his gospel starts out saying, this is the gospel of Jesus, the Son of God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And even I think maybe one of the Corinthians has like one of the earliest Christian creeds of faith early on that's supposed to be within, like, used by the church within that first decade of post-ascension.
Anyway, we're getting pretty Bible nerdy here.
So it's believed, and then we'll get back on track. 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 to 7, is believed to be a early church creed that wasn't invented by Paul.
And what does it say?
But quoted by Paul. Verses 3 to 7 says, "For what I received I pass on to you as of first importance." That's the intro. That Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all he appeared to me also as... actually, they don't believe that last one.
Right.
As to one abnormally born. So you can ignore the last one. But that first chunk was like a creed of faith, almost. If you think of like our Apostles' Creed and Nicene Creed and how they're formatted, the basics of the faith. And so, that's supposed to be the earliest one. And so, anyways, all of that said.
Yeah. I was going to say, similarly, that part in Philippians 2, where it talks about Jesus emptying himself and taking on the form of fur, is thought to be an early hymn of the church that they would have been familiar with singing, that very much makes clear that Jesus is God. And Philippians being one of those letters that Paul wrote while he was in prison.
Yeah, I just started that section in Convergence that talks about the dynamic of the emptying himself and how that works with other scriptures about him being God, and what does the emptying mean, and all that's been very, very interesting. That's the book by the author that Scott keeps talking about,
Yep.
John Thompson.
John Thompson.
Jon, because Canada. And
Super helpful. Super helpful. I've got a couple of copies of that book if anyone's interested in.
I would say
borrowing
how much if after going through our 2 series, how much of it is like almost reformatted preaching version of either Convergence or his other works combined, or do you think there's a lot more in the books that we won't ever really touch on in the series?
Well, I think there's a lot in the books, not that we won't get to, but he says a little differently. You know, I'm not just repackaging his sermon series that he preached on this in his church, although that's available out there on YouTube and that kind of stuff. But I would say we're probably like 80% inspired by John's work and his, not just his book, but his other teaching on the video series. Some of that has been very formative in my thinking about these things.
Yeah, it's thus far been a good book, and I've enjoyed it. Now that I'm attempting to read again.
Yeah, reading what you choose to read, right?
Yeah, reading what I choose to read. But I'm thinking of what you said in regards to, you know, we're talking about Paul and Barnabas and ministry together, and John Mark's doing ministry but not with Paul, and the dynamics with all of that. And you shared testimony about the last pastor here, last lead pastor, Sam Mountain, and your own wrestling with who you are naturally and your gifts and all of that versus his, and when transitioning into the role that he filled and what that tension within yourself kind of looked like, and trying to forgive him for something that he didn't do anything wrong. Can you speak a little more to forgiving people for things that aren't sin, as well as transitioning into anything, but not in, you know, our experience of transitioning into ministry positions where there's an expectation of your role and how to fill that role with how God has designed you and empowered you to be, versus maybe others' expectations of it, or maybe even your own expectations of it. And that can be ministry, that can be fatherhood, that can be, you know, husbandry, if that's a word.
It is, but it means something different.
Oh no.
That's like breeding animals, husbandry.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now you know. Yeah, so much there.
Yeah.
Most of the time we think about forgiving someone because they did something wrong. That's the earliest context we learn about forgiveness, and that's the one that kind of sticks with us throughout life, right? I'm sure with your boys, you're dealing with it as I did with my boys, and everyone who's had kids has had to deal with it at some point. You know, they're playing together. Somebody takes a toy from somebody else. Right? And then the person who got the toy taken away is either sad or they're angry. And they either retaliate or they come crying to you. And then, like, you have to teach them, like, right? You can't take a toy, but you also can't punch your brother in the face because he took the toy. And you both need to forgive each other because you were both wrong now. You know, that's what we did. That's what happens. But a lot of times, that's kind of where our thinking about forgiveness stops, right? I do something wrong. I need to go to someone and apologize so they can forgive me. But forgiveness is so much more than that. And we don't have time to get into all of what forgiveness is. But in this specific instance, there are times where we need to forgive people, not because of something wrong they did, but just because of the context it created. We then treated them differently, or we held something against them. Because forgiveness can be forgiving a wrong, but it can also just be that releasing of expectations and what was that we assumed to be there. I had so many people come up to me after the sermon on Sunday and say, we didn't have those expectations on you. We knew you were going to be different than Sam was because everyone's different. And I appreciated that. I understand where they're coming from. In that testimony in the sermon, I didn't say other people had this expectation on me, right? It wasn't about me and the congregation.
Yeah.
It was about expectations that I felt and I picked up because of who Sam was and how he did ministry. I then assumed the expectations that people here were looking for me to also shepherd in the same way that Sam shepherds. Yeah. And so there are other examples, right? Like sometimes we just have expectations of our spouse, especially when we're early in marriage or getting married, and we assume that things are going to be a certain way, and it's not that they're doing something wrong. They're just not meeting an expectation we had for them.
Yeah.
And maturing in marriage and in life means learning to let go of those things. So while I use the language of forgiveness to signify that letting go, if anyone really needed to be forgiven in this, it was myself, right? Like I had to forgive myself for putting those expectations on myself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's one thing that coming into ministry, there's a combo of expectation from the people versus expectations from yourself. Like from Silly Ones, my first job was making a youth t-shirt for every event that's ever held.
Right.
It's like, I'm sorry I'm letting you down in the t-shirt department, but it's flag football. You don't need a t-shirt every time you play flag football. I mean, like a new specifically designed for the flag football event.
Yeah.
So that was the thing. But then even coming into Collingswood and the way that Sean is able to orchestrate environments and encounters and activities for you to practice your faith within it. That's just not my natural wheelhouse, and I love it and I admire it. And so that was, I think, the first youth group I visited and had like different stations.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is incredible. That's not me.
Right.
And so trying to wrestle with, this is not me, but that's not bad.
Right.
So how do I navigate what God has gifted me with while being sensitive to what has maybe been a little bit more normal in the group beforehand? And so, yeah, it's one of those things that as leading people into their giftings and callings and various things of the, why do you need to be like other people? I understand why you admire certain qualities of other people, but like, can God not use what he gave you already? And then when you try and trust it to him and him to empower you, that it would be not necessarily greater than or better than, but it would be more fruitful than you attempting to be somebody else, and entrusting him with that. And that, since we're part of the body and we all bring something different, then like, if you do a poor copy of someone else that you admire, then you're withholding the potential of them doing what God's gifted them with, and you doing what you're gifted, and tackling things from different angles with different giftings. And so it not only gives a weight and potential shame and potential disappointment on your part, but it also holds back what you can offer as a part of the body. Yeah. And so,
and that's why a few weeks ago I shared a working model of what I call a gift constellation, right? Where it's bringing in your spiritual gifts and your natural abilities and your acquired skills. And because all of those things shift how those gifts are exercised, right?
Yeah.
You know, someone can have the gift of teaching and become a seminary professor teaching in a classroom. Mm-hmm. Someone with a gift of teaching can become a preacher in a local church. Those two things, it's the same gift, but it looks very different. And if you think, oh, spiritual gift of teaching, I have to look like seminary professor. When you get into the pulpit in a local church, everybody's eyes are going to glaze over because they're not coming to church on Sunday morning to be lectured about, you know, heresies of the Trinity or, you know, the Filioque clause in the Nicene Creed. For the average person, that's like, great, I'm glad somebody else figured that out. What do I do tomorrow morning when I go to work?
Yeah. Like even like you said, marriage, parenthood, of the influence and expectations we've received from our culture, from media, from our family, from friends, from all of those things. And, you know, I think the more we walk with God and desire to be more like Him, it just naturally flows into those areas, and you don't have to worry about those other expectations as much because you know that you are living more in the character of God, and that reflected in all of those areas just makes it so much easier. And it may be hard for you to explain that to others when they question why you look it's different or not what people expect. Like even like in regards to you were saying earlier about the sharing and the fighting over things, where I was saying, oh yeah, my son Theo picked up the whole I had it first argument. And I was like, yeah, he picked that up while he was visiting so-and-so. And they're like, oh, well, that's just a natural kid thing. Like, no matter, you know, where they're at, they're going to pick that up. And it's like, I don't think I agree with that. Like, unless he hears that as a valid argument, there would be no reason to use it. And so on a TV show or in dialogue with other kids, and they're like, well, my kids just picked it up. And what I realize,
that's parenting right there. It's, you know, there's a fight over a toy, and somewhere along the way the parent starts saying, all right, we need to give it back because they had it first.
Exactly. And so I was like, I don't think they maybe heard it phrased like that. But when a parent says they had it first, you realize there's a validity to having it first that you can then use against someone else.
Yep.
And so if a parent never uses that phrase and they don't pick it up on a TV show, they don't realize that that's how they can get their way.
Yeah, because in Uganda, if a smaller child came and took something from an older child, even if the older child got upset, the expectation was they were going to share, right? Because they had something nice to share, and they could share it with that other child.
Yeah.
And so if they tried to take it back, they would be the one getting fussed at because you should be kind to the younger child and you should share what you have.
Yeah, and so that's where I keep trying to figure out now that Theo's growing and developing and learning and understanding more of the phrases we use and the importance of them, because I also never wanted the argument of this is mine.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and at the same time, there is somewhat of an ownership or a stewardship of the things that we've been given. So how do we phrase like, God has entrusted me with this, and I'm trying to be a good steward of it. And my brother breaking it in the driveway, I don't think is a good thing. So it's not a just let people steamroll over you,
Right.
but also not a mine, I'm number one and first and all of that. And I think
Yeah, and I think there's parallels there with gifts, right? And going back to that idea of having grace for others who might have even the same gift we do, but it looks different, right? And so not just that we need to have grace for people who have different gifts from us, but even grace for those who have gifts that are the same as us, but exercise it differently, who, because of everything else, the expression of it looks different in their life. It's kind of, John talks about trying to pull together one time all of the intercessors in the church. Because he's like, man, if we can get all these people praying together, this is going to be amazing. And it was terrible. It went horribly wrong because, as they learned, intercession has different expressions. Some people have the gift of intercession, and they just want to pray for people as God puts them on their heart. And God puts them on their heart a lot of time, and they pray until they feel released from that. I've shared the great story of your mom doing that for us one time, and just amazing. Other people who have the gift of intercession, they like that list on the back of the bulletin every week, and they want to know who are the people I need to be praying for, and they are faithful to pray through that list and over that list day by day by day. That is not how I'm wired, right? I like the list. It helps keep people in front of me. That's a discipline.
Yeah.
You know, for me to look at the list, to look at the prayer requests that are given each week. But I do. But there are some people for who that's like a great joy. And then there are people who have the gift of intercession, and they've been given like a specific assignment. Someone, something, some group, some ministry to pray for, and they carry a burden for that person, place, thing, people, whatever it is. And other things, their praying is normal. You know, it's not the spiritually empowered gift. But when they pray for that thing, when God leads them to pray, it's different. And so putting all those three together in the room, it was chaos. It's like, some people were like, well, why are we gathering to pray if there's nothing we feel led to pray about? And other people were like, all right, where's the list we're going to pray through? And people were like, well, you all can pray about all that stuff. I know what my assignment is. I'll just be over here praying because that's what God's asked me to do. Same gift, same intercession, but it looks different. And we need to have grace for that as well.
Yeah. And as we navigate and practice all of this, similarly to the mind, that it's recognizing it as a gift from God that he's entrusted us with, and it's not our own thing to wield or boast as if we were able to do it ourselves. And it's because I did this, and this that God is, giving me this power, and I'm able to do it better than others because of what I've done.
Sure.
But yeah, to recognize where the power is actually from, and it's not from us.
Well, that's our conversation for today. But that doesn't mean the conversation is over. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these topics as well. To ask a question about anything we've discussed in this episode, or to join the conversation, you can head over to fumccollingswood.org/podcast. Thanks for being part of this conversation.